And we got a great panel today. We've got Mike Morris here, who is a reporter in Chronicle, who's been writing about this extensively. We've got Councilmember Ramirez, who has recently been raising some issues about TIRZs at City Council. And then I'm going to have my buddy Sergio come here for a second, and I'll be here to see him when he comes up. But let me run through for just a minute kind of what the TIRZs are, because there's a tremendous amount of confusion. It's a very complicated topic. And I will tell you that I don't think that there's a easy solution to this. You know, like just get rid of them. It's going to be more complicated to figure out how to reform them. So the legislation was created in 1987. The purpose was to provide more funding for areas that had a substantial number of substandard areas and deteriorating structures. This is a law that was passed for slum areas, for areas that were having problems with development. Now, in Houston right now, most of the money goes to the downtown TIRZs, the uptown TIRZs, Upper Covey, and Memorial City. I don't generally think of those as being slum areas, at least. And we'll talk about why that's evolved like that over time. But here's a map of where the TIRZs are in the city. Kathy Whitmire set the first one back in 1990. There's a guy named Robert Silver, some of y'all may remember, who, Steve, I bet you knew him probably. He redeveloped Lamar Terrace, which is the subdivision just north of the Southwest Freeway and just to the west of Sage Road. And it was an old rundown subdivision, and he went in and started buying it, and he got some money to through the TIRZs to start redoing the streets and utilities and stuff. And that is currently the St. George subdivision, extremely nice. You know, the homes in there are anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million. It worked pretty much like a TIRZ is supposed to work. Now, it never went away, which is not what was supposed to happen, but it worked pretty much like it was supposed to, and that was the very first game that was ever done. Bob Lanier liked them. He set up 10, maybe set up 12 more. Bill White, who didn't like them at all, didn't set up any. Anise Parker added 3, and Turner only added 1, and that was really not even active right now. So we have 28 up total, by far the most of any city in Texas. We're allowing this kind of financing a lot more than any place else does. It's important to understand that the TIRZs they have to be contiguous in the fact they've all got to be connected, but they're very much gerrymandered. If you look at this is like a congressional district, you know. This is the Southwest TIRZ, this light blue color here, and you see this is all connected by annexations through roads and all that. But if you're driving through one of these places, you have no idea if you're in the TIRZ or not, you know, and so it adds a sort of weirdness to the whole process. The basic financial structure is this. There's no new money added as a result of a TIRZ. You don't get new money from the federal government. This is just a reallocation of existing property tax revenue. And here's what happened. You take an area, let's say that the value of the property is $10 million. Let's say the city's getting $100,000 in property tax off of that $10 million every year. You said with TIRZ, those numbers are frozen for the city. The next year, the value goes up to $120 million, and it reduces $120,000 in property tax. The city gets the original $100,000, but the TIRZ gets the increment, the increase of $20,000 that it gets to go spend. And so over time, this is going to grow if the area is growing, and if you're doing a good job investing the money, hopefully that development is leading. That was a sort of virtuous cycle that the law was intended to create. But when you leave these things around forever, then some very weird things start happening. One of the very first ones that Lee Brown did was the Midtown TIRZ. And today, the Midtown TIRZ, if you're a property owner living in a Midtown TIRZ, 90% of your property taxes is going to the TIRZ, and 10% is going to the city of Houston. Now, that means that those property taxpayers are really putting 10 cents on the dollar up to pay for police and fire and parks and all the things that all the rest of us, you know, most of our tax money goes to. Now, this is I'm exaggerating this a little bit, because over the years, I'm sure you'll be shocked to know, mayors have found ways to claw back some of that money. And so Bill White, for example, started charging a pretty hefty administration fee to the TIRZs. Some of them have to kick in affordable housing money, which most of it actually doesn't go to build affordable housing. It mostly goes to fund the housing department at the city. And so that means that we don't have to pay for their normal property tax money. So some of this works its way back into the general fund. But for the most part, this is just a reduction of property taxes and moving it from one pocket to another. Now, some of you saw the paper that we did at Rice, which said this is a very regressive redistribution of property taxes. We looked at household incomes around the TIRZs versus places that were not TIRZ. The places that don't have TIRZ had substantially less household income than places that had them. But even within the TIRZs themselves, there's a big difference. And I just want to show you this example. Up with Kirby, the household income there is over twice what the city average is, and it gets to keep 76% of its revenue. Sunnyside, where the household income is about 70% of the city's average, only gets to keep it only gets 70% of his. So there's a big disparity here between how poor TIRZs and rich TIRZs are treated in terms of the amount of money that they get. This is having an increasingly large impact on the city's budget. This last audit that just came out a couple of days ago showed for the first time the city's contribution to the TIRZ exceeded $200 million. And if you recall, just before we had we lost the lawsuit of the drainage fee, the projected this deficit this year was $220 million. So this is a significant factor when you're looking at the budget. So we're going to stop. I'm going to stop there and get these guys over here involved in the conversation. We got Mike Morris, the now bearded Mike Morris. When did you get the beard? That's been fairly recent, hadn't it?
It's a winter decision.
Oh, only in winter time, yeah. Mike's is the investigative reporter for the Houston Chronicle, and he does a great job on a lot of different topics. But I think, Mike, you and I got interested in TIRZ at about the same time, because it was about the 2015 campaign that I was out going around and going to TIRZ meetings trying to get people to vote for me. And I noticed some weird things, like it seems like we're spending all the money in rich areas. And so, but Mike started writing about it about the same time, 2017 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want me to give a long...
Sure, yeah. I was going to ask you, why don't you go ahead and just talk a little bit about your reporting and what you found over the last, 7 or 8 years you've been writing about this.
I'll try to, hopefully everyone is caffeinated. The reason I started getting more interested in TIRZs is that I was at City Hall every day from roughly 2012 to the end of 2018. And that period coincided with the city hitting the rev cap, property tax cap for the first time. And the city's understanding at that time of that policy and how it related to TIRZs, which turned out to be inaccurate, as we found out later and reported a few years ago. The understanding at that time was that if you ended a TIRZ, the revenue that had been in that TIRZ just disappeared. You were forced to cut the tax rate to avoid collecting that revenue, and it just was lost to the city. The city couldn't invest it from the general fund, couldn't invest it from the TIRZ that they had just ended. So under that understanding, which we now know was wrong, the city expanded the boundaries of a bunch of TIRZs repeatedly during this period, and extended the lifetimes dramatically and expanded the boundaries sporadically, in a way that made sense if their understanding had been correct. The Memorial Park renovation that Uptown did, if the city's broke and Uptown isn't, well, sure, you draw the park into it and you funnel the money in there. Allen Parkway and Buffalo Bayou Park was redone partly by, pretty sure, the downtown TIRZ. Under that understanding, if they can have infinite money and you can't, you draw the boundaries and you tell them to fund that project. Shepherd Durham being redone by the Memorial Heights TIRZ, you redraw the boundaries and you fund it that way. You could still argue for the wisdom of doing that, but I think you can also be skeptical of the policy wisdom of doing this through these independent units versus just doing it as the city, particularly under our current understanding, because as you said, Mayor White was skeptical of TIRZs in the '06. There's a 2004 property tax cap. Mayor White put something back on the ballot in '06, you may recall, bought some room in the cap, also added a provision saying if we end or reduce our participation in a TIRZ, it's treated like an annexation. We can get that money under the city rev cap. Also, the state comptroller agrees that the way you would treat returning revenue from a TIRZ under the state cap, SB2 from whatever, 1921, whatever that was, Senator Betancourt's bill, the city could also realize that revenue under the state limit. So that's a very different understanding on a policy level than where the city was for the prior decade that led to all this expansion and extension. And so when I finally argued off of dailies, sitting there in council meetings, apologies, and had more time to do more in-depth work, I came back to this sort of policy question of how we should be approaching this under the actually accurate understanding that we have now. Does that get us there?
Yeah, so I want to make sure, just to maybe put a underscore underneath this, and I still hear council members say this all the time. I just recently heard someone on the finance committee say, we can't dissolve the TIRZ because we'll lose that tax money. And it has never been the case. I talked about this in the 2015 campaign. Mike's reported it. But you will still hear it today being said, we cannot terminate a TIRZ because we'll lose all that tax money. Is absolutely not true. So if you hear a council member say that, please say, wait a second. I heard Bill King and I heard Mike Morris, and they said this is not correct. Now, it does have a little bit of an incremental effect going forward. So if you take it out, then the city could affect that. But frankly, I've always been uncomfortable with the idea that the voters said, we want you to hold your property tax to this limit, by the way, without asking our permission. It's not really a cap, it's a trigger. It says if you go beyond this, you got to come back and ask our permission. You can raise it as much as you want to if you get our permission, which is exactly what Bill White did in 2006. Bill White raised it, but he went and got the voters' permission before he did it. So I've always been uncomfortable with it. We're going to figure out this slick way to sort of get around what the voters, said they wanted us to do. But you'll hear council people say this all the time in public. It's why they do it. But the important point here is that it really does not have a meaningful impact on the tax calculations going forward, especially when you're looking at these demographic numbers and what's happening in the city of Houston. The property values have really slowed down dramatically, and especially in the commercial areas here in the last couple of years. So this doesn't really have a big impact overall. The problem I have with it is frequently how they spend the money. Is that better? Hello? There we go. The problem I've got is when they last forever and they have all this money, is the way they start spending it. And of course, you've all heard me rail about this bus line over here on Post Oak that was built by the TIRZ, not by Metro. And they spent something like $200 million on that. Now, I bet if I went around this room, we have 1,000 better ideas of who to spend $200 million in that bus line would be. Mike, talk for a second about some of the things you found as far as expenses that sort of you found eye-popping or surprising or inappropriate, however you would describe it.
Well, I'm excited that the mayor's administration has hired accountants to do forensic auditing of some of the TIRZs and general auditing, I think, of all of them. Because certainly, I've been requesting the check registers for many years, and there's a lot of stuff that seems worthy of further review. The city has enough problems with procurement as it is. When you devolve that sort of decision making to a lower and lower level where there's less and less scrutiny, that can never have a good outcome. Certainly, I think that the day in and day out sort of concerning expenditures. We've reported on some of the concerns in the Midtown TIRZs, some questionable uses of affordable housing funds there, some of them allegedly criminal. Those charges have been filed. But there's also a level at which, even on the project side, I mean, even folks at City Hall will kind of joke about like, well, what else does Upper Kirby have to spend money on? You know, when you leave the boundaries here and you funnel tens of millions of dollars into that area for decades and decades, you run out of impactful things to spend the money on. That's how math works. I think the main point is less about individual expenditures. I don't have a laundry list for you, and when I get one, I'll publish it. You know.
Well, you reported out that that Midtown spent some affordable housing money on an office building, right?
They did. Yeah, they justified that. I think it was $22 million on the office building, $6 million on a 20-unit apartment building behind it that they built at the same time. They justified that by saying that the office building would be an affordable housing operations center. Folks in need of housing assistance could come and learn information from various nonprofits and apply for aid and that sort of thing. Part of the issue with that is that they never really got commitments from affordable housing entities to move in. The city and county never committed to put their housing entities there. Some of the marquee housing nonprofits in the community didn't commit to move in. So the building is still half empty. It's obviously a questionable use. But the main point to me that is worthy of skepticism across the TIRZ system is that the theory on which tax increment financing is based everywhere. It's in almost every state. It's in multiple countries. The theory is you take an underperforming area, you give it special treatment, it improves, and then the general fund gets a windfall when you end it. You end it, and the money flows back into the general fund to serve all the rest of the city, your special treatment having worked, and then you shift. The city's only ever ended one TIRZ. There is no cap in state law for how long they can last. It's not how it's supposed to work.
Great summary. So speaking of that oversight, Julian, something unusual happened at council not too long ago, which is these budgets, the TIRZs have to bring their budgets to council, be approved. And I think what you were able to find from your research is that they are routinely approved. I don't think anybody ever voted against one before, isn't that right? And so why don't you tell what happened about the budget that came before council when you were...
Right. It was actually in a committee meeting. I asked a person with economic development whether in the history of TIRZs and council approving TIRZ budgets and reviewing them, had a TIRZ budget ever been voted down? And the answer was no. Every TIRZ budget that has been brought before city council has been approved, which to me indicates that mayor, and I mean little m mayor, not this mayor, and council need to do a better job of oversight of these TIRZs. TIRZs are not inherently bad. Some of them do great work. I acknowledge that, but we're in need of reform, and we're in need of greater oversight of TIRZs. And Mayor Whitmire, to his credit, as Mike alluded to, has engaged a study, an audit of the TIRZs to see where we can improve in how they manage their money. So that's a good thing.
And I think you voted against a particular budget. Why don't you talk about that a little bit? And I think it's the only, Mike, is he the only councilman that's ever voted against a TIRZ budget?
I don't know for sure, but people will sometimes get into tiffs over, I wanted my friend on the board and you didn't put him there, Mayor, so I'm going to vote no on this. But I don't, basically, yes. No, this is the thing where people that vociferously defend this system, and I'm not attacking it. I agree that some of them work the way they're supposed to work and do the sort of work they're supposed to do. But defenders of this system, as Houston has run it, point to the budgets going to council every year as council oversight. I think that's a very questionable point.
Yeah. So what happened in that particular case?
Sure. In December, I voted against two TIRZ budgets, very different TIRZs. One was Upper Kirby, a very wealthy TIRZ, and then the other was Fifth Ward TIRZ, a very poor TIRZ, and I voted against them for different reasons. I voted against Fifth Ward TIRZ because of its management, which has huge conflicts of interest and needs to be changed out, and the mayor has taken steps to do that, again, to his credit. I voted against the Upper Kirby TIRZ budget because I thought this was an example of a large amount of money being spent unwisely. When you look at all the city's needs, the TIRZ really should be spending money on those things that we need most. And there was a particular expenditure with regard to Levy Park, which is a beautiful park, world-class park. If you go to their website, they'll brag about all the awards they've won. If you go to the park, you'll see it's a beautiful, beautiful park. I don't know how much money's already been spent on it, maybe up to $20 million to create it. Small park. And the Upper Kirby District, or TIRZ management, proposes to spend another $14.5 million to acquire a small parcel of land adjacent to it and all the costs that are associated with that. And I looked at that in relation to our park needs across the city and thought it was not a wise expenditure of money. In 2023, the Parks Department did a study. They ranked from 1 to number 186 the parks in greatest need of attention here in Houston, because some of them are in awful shape. No basketball hoops, no playground equipment, just terrible shape. You can imagine. The top 10 parks most in need of attention were in our most underserved districts, D and B. No big surprise there. But Levy Park, which is going to get up to $14.5 million through the Upper Kirby TIRZ, where would you guess that was on that list of number 1 to 186? 186. You are absolutely right. And I just looked at that and thought, that's not the way our TIRZs should operate, and not the way we should operate as a city. So I voted against it.
So I think this is a good time to bring in my friend Sergio Lira. Sergio, come on up here for a second. I don't know if y'all know Sergio or not, but Sergio is an icon in the East End and knows the Latino community better than anybody. He's the guy I go to if I want to understand anything about what's going on in the Latino community, and has been involved in LULAC for a long time. And so Sergio saw this, what was going on with the Levy Park and what was going on in parks in his area, and to say it mildly, it upset him. And so he's gotten involved. And in fact, for those of you that watch What's Your Point, we'll be talking about this tomorrow on the show. So look forward to that. Is that mic working? Try that to see.
Testing. Yes.
So tell us a little bit about what got your Latino up.
Got my Latino up. Yes. Thank you, Bill, for inviting me to say a few words. And I'm excited to be in this room this morning in this cold weather with all these young, beautiful people. And I just wanted to say that, when I found out and they ran a quick story on it, and briefly it caught my attention that the city council and mayor had approved this expenditure of $14.5 million for Levy Park. And I nearly fell off my chair as I was having my coffee this morning, because let me just keep it as simple and as concrete as possible. I'm a lifelong Houstonian that lives in the East End and the Gulfgate area, where H-E-B is one of our biggest stores there. I'm just a few blocks from the Gulfgate H-E-B where I live, on the other side, right behind Barnett Stadium, a stadium where many students come for Friday night lights, football, basketball, tournaments, and all of that. But when I step outside my home, after I heard that, I realized, wait a minute, something's wrong here, because the two nearest parks in my neighborhood do not even have a playground for kids to play. they're so neglected. And Bill mentioned something in the study which is really important. He said the hollow communities. And hollow communities are becoming more and more prevalent and neglected in our city. So we definitely have to address this issue. What I'm learning about the TIRZs is that it's almost the opposite of Robin Hood. It is the opposite of the Robin Hood plan because you're taking taxes that we all pay in that area, working class neighborhoods, wealthy neighborhoods, into the general fund. And actually you have this almost unique government from folks that are appointed. They're not even elected. And a lot of them are not professionals. A lot of them are not financial experts. So this TIRZ has really gotten out of control. And so it explains a lot as to what I've been experiencing since 1995. You know, I'm an educator by profession, and I've always wondered, when I moved into my neighborhood right out of college as a school teacher, I said, you know, I'm going to buy my home, I'm going to live in here, and I'm going to remain hopeful. I'm going to do the right things. I'm going to support our candidates. I'm going to work. I'm going to get engaged. I'm going to go to city council. I'm going to talk to them about our conditions. Let's collaborate and let's make our community better. And that's we all should, right? That's what we teach kids. But when I did that since 1995 and it fell on deaf ears, I realized that we're in bad shape. Something needs to be done. And you'll see an example of that tomorrow on Fox 26. But more importantly is that the children today are our future. Children today are being addicted to social media and tablets. They need parks. They need a playground. They need basketball hoops. They need soccer field. And this, if you revitalize a park in the community, it lessens crime in the community, and kids grow up being kids. Don't you all agree that kids should be kids and play in parks?
All right. We're getting towards the end of this segment, so I'm going to stop and take some questions on TIRZ. Yes, sir.
Let me ask the obvious question. How do you terminate the Upper Kirby TIRZ thing?
You know, these council people have to decide to do it. Yeah. It's not as simple as that. Well, if you're going to terminate these, you need to come up with it's like a corporation. It needs to be liquidated. They all have a bunch of debt, by the way. We're almost $1 billion in debt in these things, which none of you got to approve as voters. And so you've got to figure out how to pay that back and set aside money to do that. There's assets. So you have to come up with a plan of liquidation. Just be thoughtful. And like I say, not all of them need to be terminated. The folks out in Kingwood have one called Lake Houston that is well run and does a bunch of great projects, and they never get any capital improvement money from the city. If it wasn't for that, nothing would ever get done up there. So every one of them is unique. You need to take them case by case. But certainly if I was doing a hit list, you know, probably Uptown would be the top of that list. Midtown would be pretty close, Upper Kirby, you know. But we've got to have the political will to do it. Yes, ma'am, Beth.
I was appointed by Mayor Lanier to serve on the first TIRZ, St. George Place. And when we started that, you know, it was definitely necessary out the blighted property, sort of in the middle of the Galleria area. But it was my understanding at that time that once it was sort of built out, that the TIRZ would go away. By the way, I represented Robert Silvers too, so I had to resign from the TIRZ, which I did voluntarily.
Yeah, no, that is the way the model's designed to work. If you look at other cities, that's what happens, but it hadn't happened here because of this weird misinterpretation that Robert got. By the way, I don't know if y'all noticed or not, but I am addicted to Diet Coke, just like Donald Trump and Elon Musk are, so I may not be the best recommendation in the world for you coming to a breakfast with me. Okay, anybody else have any questions? Yes, ma'am, Jerry.
Okay, as somebody who lives here in this hollow community, I would like to connect with anybody that's got any ideas about how to treat those hollow communities, right?
Get Sergio's number. Help him. Anybody else got any questions about these? Yeah.
TIRZs were created in areas for the ability to help that area develop. It seems to me the TIRZs are doing a lot better job than the city of Houston. It seems to me that TIRZ can help areas improve. And it seems to me that the issue really is, at some point, should some of the excess money they have flow to the city. If you look around the city doesn't beautify the area. And the TIRZ has that ability.
Well, remember, there's some of those in the management districts, which are a little bit different than the TIRZs. Typically, the beautification, all that kind of stuff is done by management districts and not TIRZs, which don't get any property tax money. So, but look, I'm not suggesting that this is a one size, let's just go, mow the grass and get rid of all these things. I think, but there needs to be some reform. When they're spending $200 million on bus lines, when they're spending, $14.5 million on a park in the middle of Greenway, I'll tell you another misallocation of money type thing. The Montrose TIRZ had planned to do a project over there to redo Montrose Boulevard, which included about, I want to say, $30 million or so in flood money, flood improvements over there. And that project got killed because the mayor didn't like it. But there's not any significant flooding in Montrose. If you go back and look at Harvey, there were maybe a half dozen houses that flooded in Harvey. Now, there's a community out on the east side of town called Pleasantville, and I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with Pleasantville or not, but it's just inside the loop, and it chronically floods all the time. And by the way, it's a very old African American community, and it used to drain fine, but we built the East Loop and dammed up its drainage on the east side, and then the port built a spoil site to the south and dammed up its drainage on the south side. And so it floods all the time. I mean, like half the houses flood. And they've been asking for $20 or $25 million for as long as I can remember to do their flood work, and they've never gotten it. But yet we're going to go over to Montrose and spend $30 million on basically fixing street flooding. So that's the kind of thing that I don't like about the way the TIRZs allocate money. Anything else? We got to stop here. I'm going to take one more question. Okay, I'm going to take you since you're up here at the lead table. TIRZ.
Before Bill, I mean, I totally agree they need reforms, but I am concerned the more money that flows into the city, the more the public employee unions say, great, we can get more raises, we can get better retirement benefits, and then we don't necessarily end up better off than we were before. So,
well, that's a question of electing better people, Tori. You know what I mean? Yeah. All right, we're going to stop here because I know there's a bunch of old guys like me that need to run to the restroom, okay? Because that means drinking too much Diet Coke. We'll be back. Get back here about 10 minutes if you can, 15 minutes, because the mayor is in the house, and we're going to hear from him in just a minute, okay? Thank you, guys.